All right. Greetings, everybody. Mesquel, great to see you all here tonight. I'm going to see if I can grid us here. There we go. I can see myself up in the top corner. That's helpful. Reminds me that you can see me as well. Want to welcome everybody to our town hall. It's 6 o'clock on June 6th, and it is the 39th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. Sorry, the 79th anniversary, not the 80th, 79th. And we're happy to have you all here with us tonight. And if you're not joining us live, of course, you may be watching this in a recording sometime in the near or distant future, which is also probably very helpful. And either way, welcome and hope that this is informative. Now, if you are watching the recording, you note that if you already understand or are not particularly interested in the background information, you may wish to move ahead to when we talk about the actual goals. And when we post, what we'll do is we'll have a bit of an agenda there or an itinerary, so you can pick and choose the what is of specific interest to you before you watch the whole presentation, if that's what you'd like to do. And of course, and this is incredibly important, we will have posted by now a link on our website to a form. That form will open up at 7:30 this evening, be open for a period of 2 weeks, so you can provide just that last bit of feedback that the board will receive before proceeding to our January meeting, where we're going to talk about any little changes or modifications and ultimately move towards approval.
June meeting.
June meeting. What did I say?
January.
Oh boy. Okay. June. Wow. Okay. We should just we'll cut that part.
I'm just thinking ahead, Peter.
Yeah. Well, we're behind. We're actually not editing this, so I'll just have to live with that. First of all, I acknowledge that School District 69, Qualicum resides on the Coast Salish territory and within the shared territory of the Snuneymuxw and Qualicum First Nations. It is always an honor to be living and learning in that most beautiful place. And incidentally, I will mention that I am in my own basement in Hammond Bay region, Snuneymuxw territory. But for most of you on this call, you're somewhere, and most likely will be watching this in our district and within those lands as described. I'd like to introduce our Board of Education, and if I could have our board members just turn off their mute if they're on mute, and mention that our board welcomes you to our town hall this evening in order of from left to right in the photo below. We have Carol Kellogg from Area G. Give us a wave, Carol. There you are. And Julie Austin, trustee from Area F. Are you there, Julie?
I'm right here.
Okay, there you are. If you talk, then the camera switches to you. And then Barry Curlin from Area H. There you are. There you are, Barry. And Elaine Young, our vice chairperson, and also trustee from Area G. Right there, Elaine.
Hi, everybody.
There you are. And our chair, who's up at the top corner for me, chair and chairperson and trustee from Area E.
Good evening.
There you go. First of all, a bit of an agenda for this evening. Welcome, acknowledgements, introductions of our board. That's we've covered that so far. I'll give you a background on strategic planning. Why do we do it? What is it and why do we do it? I think that's probably instructive as far as the whole background piece. We'll spend some time talking about the frameworks that informed us and continue to inform us. The process we used, and of course the key data points that drove these conversations and ultimately led to the goals and outcomes. And then we'll talk about the goals and outcomes. We'll explain them a little bit, tie them back to the data, the conversation, the frameworks, and give you, the audience, a little bit of an idea of what led to those being chosen and crafted in the way that they are. And then we'll have a chance for some live questions and discussion, and then maybe some final comments and a link to back to that feedback loop. So if you are inclined to provide us with some comments, you're able to do so. Okay, here we are, strategic planning. Why? What's the big deal here? Well, we should have one of these. Why? It describes what we do. That seems to be relevant, clarifies what we do it, informs all operational plans, including tech plans, communication plans. I stutter on the word communication, assessment plans and facility plans, and any other plan that that we have in order to put our work on the ground in a school district, including, you know, many others potentially, but these, of course, are things that I'm quite certain we will be pursuing. It's best developed collaboratively with stakeholders. I'll talk a little bit about that word collaboration in a moment, but without that key input, without listening, without paying attention, without conversing, you're going to end up with something that is lacking. I told the board early on, before we started our process, I can go in my office and I can knock one of these out in about 3 hours. I will like it, but it probably won't resonate with as many people, perhaps won't resonate with very many people at all. And so it's important to be inclusive. It's important to connect. It's important to involve and collaborate. It's actually now a legislative requirement to have a strategic plan. It wasn't for years, and very few districts actually went down this path, despite all the advantages of it. But as of about 3 years ago, it is absolutely required by all school districts in British Columbia. And I would say, even if it wasn't, it's important because it keeps us focused. Having a good strategic plan keeps you moving in the same direction. It keeps you on the same page, so to speak. There's a couple of metaphors for you, cliches even, but I believe it to be absolutely true. And most importantly, it absolutely leads to better outcomes for students. I genuinely believe that, and would be advocating for having a strategic plan in a school district, even if it wasn't a legislative requirement. Big fan of the process and the improved product that comes from such conversations and such work. This is the IAP2 public participation spectrum. It's a version of it, maybe the classic version. And I share this because I think it's important. And it kind of gives a bit of a vocabulary around what public participation looks like. And I won't dive into the details here, but as you can see at the top, starts on the left-hand side with inform and works through consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. And very briefly, you know, sometimes we have interactions with the public where we're just basically telling them what we're doing. It might be something of minor significance. It might be major significance, but we don't have any control over it. But in some of these conversations, there's not much room for variance. For example, the government passes legislation, no smoking on school property. Well, that's a law now. We have to abide by it. We put up our signs and we are required to enforce it. Nothing to talk about there, really. And then there is pieces where we start to engage. We might have a lot of constraints around it, but we are checking in because there are bits and pieces, parts of it perhaps, where we can shape it to reflect public preferences. Perhaps calendars, an example of that. We do have a ton of things we have to do, but there are some places where we can make some changes based on public preference. Involve is a little bit more about what the public wants. And so we're engaging more earnestly, more deeply with the public at that point. Then into collaborate, where it's almost mutual, like it's a very balanced kind of a conversation. And then over to empower, where we're actually turning the choice over to the public completely. And there's really only one example of that that I can think of in public education, and that is trustee elections. And we might do, you might do a poll or a survey and then lock yourself into the result, but that doesn't happen very often. It's really the election. So public votes, the person who gets the most votes gets elected. That's empowering the public. Most of the work we do in strategic planning will really be in that involve and collaborate range, somewhere in between, back and forth a little bit, being respectful, of course, of the frameworks, which I'll describe in a moment. Now, what's the process look like? Well, first, we've got to activate. We gather information through surveys that ask big questions. We launched that at the very beginning of the school year. We gather input from parents, staff, and students, and I'll describe that process a little bit more in depth in a bit. We examine and disaggregate our district data. That is a non-stop process, especially if you're within 100 meters of me. You can't be helped. This is what fascinates me as much as anything else. And of course, we can listen for the purpose of understanding. It's not just about ticking a box. It's about trying to really get what is important and reflect that in our work, respect that in our work. The next phase is to acquire, and that means essentially assemble a large, diverse committee to create a strategic plan. And we did that. We put together a group of 40 people, to really take a deep look at our data, take a look at our frameworks, and start to prioritize that information, categorize that information, and prioritize it. And try to reflect, reflect who we are and what we value as a district and a community. See the board's mission, vision, and values in there, which I'll describe in a moment. Take a good look at parent, staff, and student input, which we certainly did, and then use that to set goals, outcomes, and indicators of success. We also need to make sure that we're supporting ministry frameworks for enhancing student learning and the BC curriculum, for example, the FESL as we sometimes call it. And I think this is also important. Make sure that we're paying attention to our own principles of learning, the beliefs that we've established in our school district around what is good instructional practice, what is good assessment practice, and to make sure that that is always front and center in the work that we're doing. And then into apply, getting it on the ground. And that means beginning that next level of work, sharing and explaining the strategic plan through meetings, publications, and media, ostensibly, although we're going to collect some responses for the next 2 weeks. This is the first step. We are into rollout here, and anyone who is on this call or who is watching this video, this is the early point of this process where we're starting to share more broadly and can use this as a stepping off point to start to get really down into the work. And of course, that means guiding all processes, the plan that I mentioned earlier, aligning with our school and department plans, and weaving these things together over the next 5 years so that we're all going in the same direction, we're speaking the same language, we're emphasizing the same things, and then supporting people where they are to get them where they need to be. And that's incredibly important. You can't just fire this up and expect everybody to be with you. There's a process of inclusion that needs to occur where we're talking about the values, we're drilling down on the vocabulary, we're sorting out the concerns, and making sure that this speaks to people in a way that's effective and that informs their work in a reasonable and effective way. And of course, you can't just set it and forget it. We get on the ground, we're working on it. Ultimately, we've got to have moments in time where we're checking in, iterating it, modifying it when we need to, so that it continues to be effective. Now, 3 statements which I think are important. We've got to work together to align our organization. We've got to work together to set our direction. We've got to work together to develop our people. It's those core types of beliefs that will ultimately lead us to greater success as a school district. Now, I'm going to take a quick sip of water and talk about the frameworks that advised us, that shaped our thinking as we were building our plan. Number 1, principles of learning. What are our beliefs around what matters as a school district? And so, of course, our senior team had a hand in this, but we really took up the conversation with our Curriculum Implementation Advisory Committee, our CIAC. And our First People's Principles of Learning was one of the first things that came up in that conversation. And there's a general belief in our school district that this is important. It should be emphasized. Now, it's existed in the province of British Columbia for a number of years. We've seen it on our walls. There's posters. We've talked about it in professional learning conversations. We talked about it in staff meetings. It certainly exists, and putting it into our principles of learning is an opportunity for us to kind of enshrine it into our practice and to publicly acknowledge its importance and lead these principles into our system and with some kind of authority behind it. And we certainly have done that. You'll see what we've done with our strategic plan in a few minutes, where it's actually risen to another level of significance. And then there's these three beliefs here, and I'll read them out. I won't read everything that's on the screen, as I go through this slideshow, but I'll read these three. We believe learning is inclusive, relevant, and flexible, with student voice and choice infused into instructional design and assessment practices. We believe quality teaching and leadership require collaboration and reflection to co-develop effective student-centered learning environments. And we believe learning best occurs in environments that support the student to explore their identity and full potential. And if you have been really paying attention, really paying attention over the last several years, if you've been involved in previous strategic planning processes, if you've been, invested in the teaching and learning in the school district, this should seem very familiar to you, because what this content is really a summary, a distillation, if you will, of our previous strategic plan goals. And the point here is that this work carried on for years. There was a collaborative process to generate them. They're living and breathing in our school district, at least to some extent, and it didn't seem right to leave them behind as we move forward. And so this was a place to hang on to these, and they're very instructional in their intention, and so to weave them back here into our principles of learning and use them as a framework seemed like an appropriate thing to do. And we were able to get agreement at the CIAC table around that, and wordsmith a little bit, simplify them a little bit, so that we could use them as we move forward. So it's a nod to the past, but it's still a value system that needs to move forward with us, and there's some agreement on that. Vision statement. Well, we've got it here in 3 languages, and this is, I think, a good forward step for us. We had it before. We had our vision statement before in English and French. We've added Hokominum, and you'll notice that they're a little bit different. And if you're translating them in your head right now, and I'll explain that in a moment. But in English, always growing. Okay, that statement seemed to resonate with our board and our community. Grandissant ensemble in French. It means learning together or growing together. And then yesisum in Hokominum, meaning we grow. Similar statements, but not exactly the same, not a perfect translation. And that's okay. And one of the things we've really come to learn around language as we work with our partners is that it's really tied to context. It's tied to the people. It's tied to the history. It's tied to the place. And we felt it was more important to have slightly different terms, because those terms had more weight in that language, were a more profound statement in that language than it was to have the exact same statement translated, even if you could do that. And we're not even sure that we could. So it is a little different, but it means ultimately the same thing, and is more meaningful to have them expressed in this way, we think. So that's the way that we went. And I mean, this is certainly learning that we've done with our language teachers. Tracy Finstad especially is in our ministry day learning session, talked extensively about that. And I can tell you, it goes right back to high school French, where my teacher Bertrand Lambert said, "Mr. Joy, that's anglicisme. That statement does not exist in this language," right? Where I was trying to convert it too directly, and therefore being inaccurate, right? So that's the explanation of why they're slightly different, and but equally meaningful, and I think equally important. On to the mission statement. We embrace a spirit of curiosity and joy for learning that challenges everyone to become informed and confident designers of their own future. Again, this is a bit of an adaptation, a distillation of the previous mission statement, which was a little bit longer than this. And so this gets down to the point a little bit more quickly, but still captures something that I think is very important to our learning community and especially our board. Very much believe that learning is about curiosity and joy. And we should always be striving for those qualities when we are working with students and in a learning environment. And I really like this expression, informed and confident designers of their own future, informed and confident designers of their own future. And I'm going to weave that into, I think, the grad speeches that I'll be sharing in our upcoming graduation events. I just think that that is an excellent statement of what our intention is as a school district. And so I'm really pleased to share this with you. And the board and I worked on these statements in the fall, and I think there was some, very strong uptake on the ishness of this, the belief of this, the power of this potentially. Everybody's got a mission statement. It's nice to have one that you like, that speaks to the work you're trying to do. I wouldn't say that that's ultimately true of every mission statement I've ever seen or been involved with. I'm a fan of this one. Our values, and here it is, a list of things that our board believes and ultimately will believe as a school district. And you say it like this: we are, and I put that in brackets, we are dynamic. We certainly are aspiring to be all of these things. We're aspiring to be dynamic, effective, energetic, and supportive of diversity and pursuit of learning. We are connected with students, families, staff, communities, and land. We are sustainable, stewardship and care for relationships, personal well-being, finances, and the environment, all in our purview. We are equitable, fairness, justice, honesty, integrity, dignity, and respect. And we are purposeful. We are focused, efficient, reliable, and accountable in improving student outcomes. And so all of these remain touchstones for us as a school district. And all of these values certainly informed the conversations that we were having as we developed our strategic plan. Now, what is the FESL? This is the Framework of Enhancing Student Learning. This is absolutely something we need to pay attention to. It is in the legislation. It's saying that we need to do these things. And so therefore we do. And you can see from the top statement, well, we need to create and maintain a strategic plan. Okay, check, we're on it. Annually report on student outcomes, doing it, and then put systems in place to continuously improve educational outcomes for all students and improve equity. And they name Indigenous students, children and youth in care, students with disabilities or diverse abilities. So that is the focus of this work. That is the focus of our school district. And I won't read these next two sections, but I will just give you a little bit of an overview. Focus on the educated citizen. This is what we're trying to generate. We're trying to create, this person that steps forward into the world, ready to, to take it on and make a difference, and enable through capacity building, strategic planning, coordinated implementation, and reporting. This is we do this work. This is what we need to do. Here's the old educated citizen mandate, and this came out of the Sullivan report in the late 80s, and back when the ministry is creating this year 2000 program. If you've been around long enough, you might remember it. Didn't work out for a number of reasons. I won't get into them tonight, but the thinking that was informing it was very, I think, profound and useful. And this concept stayed with us for a good 20 plus years. I always get a kick out of the pictures of the young people there. very cool, very 90210, they're not high school kids, they look like they're 28, but this logo, this picture, this whole arrangement was a part of BC education for quite a long while, and then was replaced by the more current version here, and a little more wordy, but also maybe a little more easy to nail down. Intellectual development. Okay, so there's a series of comments or indicators of intellectual development there. What does it mean? It means those things. Human and social development. All right, broader perspective on what we would like our students to be. Healthy, productive, engaged, that kind of, caring about each other, that's in there. Okay, and rightly so. And then of course also career development, getting our students ready for the workforce, getting them ready so that they can take care of themselves, they can be self-sufficient. And so those three categories need to be represented in our plan. And so this has informed us, certainly a part of our conversations as we took that data and made sense of it. So here's our next step. Take another water here. And I was happy to find this picture on the internet. You get an idea, you put people together, you build a thing, you launch it, you watch it, hopefully it hits the target, and that's kind of, the infographic that you have there. So here is the concept of planning, and I will give a nod to Burke and Larson, who have given us some of the means to do this. A little bit of background. I mean, I'm a friend of Mr. Burke's. We met on social media years ago. It seemed that we agreed on some things, and then ended up playing golf and railing about a certain issue in education around, essentially lack of accountability, lack of follow through. We do things, but we're not always sure, why we're doing it, or that it's actually leading to significant and positive change. And then I kind of met up with him, probably a year later. He says, I'm going to do something about this. And I said, okay, good for you, And then a year later, he had an idea, and I went, wait a second, that's got legs. And it turned into this model. And now, of course, he's going all around North America, around the world, actually been in Australia, New Zealand, teaching people this concept. And it's so simple and elegant, it actually irritates me that I didn't think of it. Right, because and when he described it to me, I thought that is exactly what we should be doing. That's going to be helpful. And it's just very, simply create broad goals. Right, it's the same planning process you would use for strategic planning anywhere, but then you start to determine more specific outcomes, and you identify students will do. You name it. You make it observable. This is what we want to see them doing, and then you identify what the educators will do. And then you identify the activities or artifacts that will provide evidence that you're actually successfully doing these things, the students are actually doing these things. And this is my little wrinkle here, because I don't like to leave us out. I don't like it to seem like we're imposing a concept on people without participating in it ourselves, giving responsibility to ourselves as well. Identify what district and school leadership will do to direct or support the process. And you'll see the model here in a few minutes, and it'll make sense to you. But that's the concept that we're attacking here. And here's the process. We did parent guardian staff survey in September. Got about 85 different respondents in the bigger question, strengths and stretches. And then about 35 discrete responses in regard to, what do we want our learners to be able to do when they leave our system. And I'll tell you, it was very rich. Some people wrote pages, hundreds of words. Some people, brief responses, but some people wrote and wrote and wrote, and it was really instructive. And then we were able to use that, as I'll describe in a moment. We did student focus groups at every single school in the district. All of our elementary schools had group of students that were pulled into a conversation to ask the same questions. High school kids, younger kids, and then also older kids asked these questions. And also I had charted the most common parent responses. I'd put them on a graph. This is what your parents said. And do you agree with it? And ostensibly our students said, yeah, they're getting it. And I was pleased to hear that, maybe even a little surprised. It's not that parents don't know their kids, because they really do, but it's that students would say parents knew what they're talking about, because you get adolescents, they often will push back and say, no, we know they don't. But there was alignment there, which was, I think, very helpful. And those student focus groups were then asked, to generate content. And that was what we used for the bulk of our planning process. And I'll show you a picture of what this is going to look like on the ground. But their ideas were printed out in these slips of paper, and then we went through a sorting process to assemble those into categories and use that parent data to inform that. Affinity clustering, right? That's the categorization. Ranking, where it's a method to basically take these categories and put them in order. And then we spent some, once we had those, we generated draft goal, language and outcomes for students, staff, evidence, and district support, spent time doing that. Then I took those away and I worked on them. And then I sat with my team and we worked on them some more. And then we got back together with that big group of 40, and we added groups of students from KSS and BSS, and went through that information, had a discussion, had table talk, had reporting out, and asked the students, does this work for you? And then took the feedback from the room, and especially the kids, and then try to get that, back into the outcomes, the goals and outcomes as revisions. And then of course this final product is what you're going to see tonight. What's affinity clustering? Well, there you go. You have slips of paper, you print them out, put them in envelopes, and then have tables of participants, sort them into groups and of like concepts. When somebody says this, what do they mean by that? And you'll see the concepts that emerged here in a moment, but it's an opportunity for people to really chew on that and talk about what the students are trying to tell us through these data points, and try to create bulk ideas or categories or boxes that will allow us to focus and then generate more work from. And you see in the middle picture here, there is a printout of the parent feedback. And so while we were sorting the student data into categories, we got to a point where we wanted to see if there was alignment there beyond what the students said there was. And so we had everybody in the room read that, that parent feedback, and then use that to make sure that we were getting it, and then it was all in the right, I would say, order. The ranking was appropriate. And then we did this, right? There's your Borsa rank. And the categories that are on the left, and then if you're a 1, if this was your really your strongest category, it got a 1, and the second strongest got a 2, and so on. And of course that is my actual handwriting. And when I was a teacher, I got no end of grief from the kids for being illegible. So I don't have any ego around it. Here's what it says, so you can actually read it. Top 1 was healthy self. Okay, strong first place. And of course, this is a concept that was spooling up long before COVID. And we see that students are under pressure to be successful. They have lots of different responsibilities, challenges that have grown and emerged over the last 20 years. Technology is a big part of that. As much as it's a boon in many ways, it creates pressure on our students. It erodes their sleep. It creates a sense of competition sometimes, and so that is something that was really on everyone's minds, parents' minds, educators' minds of students long before COVID. And then COVID comes along, and it's more so because of that isolation that occurred, because of that sense of that breaking of community that we experienced when we had to go through our different restrictions and protocols and so on. Number two, social skills, emotional intelligence. That was the next one that came up and related to the healthy self, but not exactly the same thing. And essentially just an understanding that we need to get along, we need to respect each other, we need to treat each other well. And of course, those two ideas are very much tied together, and they could have been the same idea in lots of ways. And then when I go through the actual goal areas, we can see how they sort of overlap to a certain extent. But once again, was interesting before COVID, became more interesting during COVID, because there's certainly the isolation, the mask wearing, all those types of things held our students back when it came to developing those what we call normal relationships. And there's an appetite to engage in more activities and more support, more learning around helping our kids regain those skills, develop those skills, because we really believe they're important. Then we had critical thinking, academic skills, and practical life skills. They're sort of 3, 4, and 5. And critical thinking is a big part of our curriculum. It's a big part of the FESL mandate, but it also showed up in parent data and student data, and a recognition that there's a world out there that needs our students to be deep thinkers, problem solvers, that the real success in life it requires us to be able to work our way through these different challenges, and universally that was deemed to be important. Academic skills, numeracy and literacy are rated. We saw comments from parents like, let's not forget about this, right? We want our kids to have a chance to go on and do other things, and whether it's post-sec or workforce, but we've got to hold on to this as critical. And then there's this other stream that kind of wove in there, maybe more so than I would have seen in previous processes, the practical and life skills. My kid needs to know how to change a tire, right? That somebody said that. Kids need to know how to do taxes. They need to adult. We need our kids to learn how to adult. And that's been woven into the school system to some degree. It was, the planning class, which morphed into CLC and, and so on, that's speaking to that. But we don't want to stop there. We don't want to have that be a checkbox. We want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of kids and getting them ready for life after school, whatever that means, beyond workforce, beyond school, and not let go of that. And of course, community and global awareness was another piece that sort of emerged in there, and it's related to healthy self and social skills. It was all kind of tied together to some extent, but there's a recognition that there is a world out there beyond, what's in the room with us, and that we want our students to be good citizens in their neighborhood, in their community, on the ocean side, on the island, and of course across the world. And there's a place for us as a school system to support that kind of awareness and leadership. Methodology here, that's this. I won't stay here long, but this is the inverted Y. And this is an example engagement. It's not what we've done, but this shows you what it looks like to sort of plot this out. When you want your learners to do something, you're going to name it. and then you state what the educators are due to get them there, and then you state the activities or assessments or artifacts or whatever that are going to prove it. And so we went through this type of activity. It's the same activity that's going on in all of our schools with their school plans, but this was, the methodology we used, and it helps to go in order, to kind of tie them together. And I won't labor the point, but that's a Burke Larson kind of structure that helped us. On to goals and outcomes. Here we are. Okay. All right, where did we land? Well, goal number 1, to learn. And so here we have clustered those 3 learning concepts together, right? And you go back 2 slides: critical thinking, academic skills, practical life skills. Those things were all rolled together to goal number 1. And one of the things that I said at the very beginning of this process and echoed throughout was that this plan, as much as we're going to, it's not just a learning plan, it is a strategic plan for a school district, and it's broader than that. We should never lose track of the fact that learning is number 1. It is our core function. And so when you see the data emerge that says, nope, this matters, this matters, this matters, you're going to put this front and center. When we were doing the order, establishing the order of the goals, and we had a different order, and one of the feedback in that last conversation was, this should be first. You were talking about how important this is, put it first. I'm like, yeah, put it first. Absolutely. So here it is. We're focusing on student curricular skills and competencies that lead to meaningful graduation and a successful life beyond school. Kind of a mouthful, but one of the things that happens when you do strategic planning exercises like this and you start the rollout is it triggers conversations with people, and those conversations are already starting to happen outside of that room of 40. Well, what do we mean by meaningful graduation? Well, I spoke about that at the ministry day, and the flexibility around the word meaningful. It's very personalized, but then you get into other conversations. What's success? What do we mean by that? Is that a judgmental thing, or is it open-ended and personal? And so we'll have lots of conversations where we get to the root of this, generate some common language and understanding, and what that really means. Now, down at the bottom here, you see from the first people's principles of learning. So learning recognizes the role of Indigenous history. Learning is embedded in memory, history, and story. Learning involves patience and time. Well, those are 3 elements from the first people's principles of learning. Now, you'll recall from early on, I mentioned that as a principle of learning for our school district, and that we've adopted this as ours. And in our conversations, it was raised that, hey, if you actually mean it, these should go into the goals. And rather than rewrite the goals and change the meaning of our goals in a way that it was going to be troubling for us, or rewriting the first people's principles of learning, which probably would be challenging, but likely disrespectful, right? What we've done is we've just embedded them here as a framework to inform us as we get at the work of learning, okay? And so the first people's principles of learning, these ones work here. We've separated them out and divided them up amongst the 4 goals. And so we think that's a good way to remind us of their importance going forward. So there they are, and that's the first section of them. And here we are. What are the students going to do? Well, we want them to make choices about their learning within the big ideas and select the strategies, tools, and supports they need to be successful. Core BC curriculum stuff. Students acquire practical and life skills needed to thrive on their own as independent adults. There it is, right? Adulting, changing a tire, doing your taxes, knowing how to do those things, and be ready to be on your own out there. Students ask relevant and meaningful questions about their own context and the world beyond. A couple of things going on there, but really getting at student agency around learning and recognizing that they don't exist in an insular world, that they are part of something bigger than themselves. Students demonstrate they are proficient literacy and numeracy learners. Some of the parents said, don't forget about that stuff. Core skills matter and will always matter. And I will confess that this is also in here partly because of the FESL requirement. We want to make sure that we're respectful of ministry mandate here. And same with S5, students are able to successfully transition through the BEC K-12 curriculum. This is our core function. And I would say S4 and S5, the idea, that it's about curriculum on its own, I think is incomplete. I think we believe as educators that part of the function, perhaps the key function of the K-12 curriculum, is to get us to literacy and numeracy. And so we'll talk a lot about that in the next 4 or 5 years. And S6, students graduate with the skills and knowledge that is meaningful to them, prepared for successful life beyond school. And again, I spoke to some of this, and there's still more to unpack, but that's what we want our kids to be able to do. And here's what educators are going to do to get them there. We're going to support students with their understanding of the BC curriculum while allowing for flexibility and agency in student learning and assessment, right? Tackling a couple of those student goals in one statement. Educators bring real life problems and skills into the learning environment and make time for meaningful and authentic activities. Okay, it's got to matter. Educators teach questioning strategies, critical thinking frameworks, and provide opportunities for student inquiry. Getting really specific about ensuring that our students are, I would say, capable of that critical thinking, able to, to be these confident designers of their own future. Educators demonstrate a high level of fidelity to teaching, supporting, and assessing of core skills. Right? There's that FESL piece. Educators work toward the success of all students, building the connections and skills that will lead to academic success and meaningful graduation. Okay, there's a little bit of a restatement of the concepts, but you can see that responsibility is represented. And then on to tasks and district. Well, projects and learning activities show authenticity and agency. Students successfully complete their local and provincial assessments, and graduation rates and exit surveys indicate successful and meaningful graduation. And we are paying attention to graduation rates. You can't be within 100 meters of me and not know this. But exit surveys, I think, are the next step here. And I think this is really important. It's not just to have our kids get across the threshold some way or another and then release them out in the world unprepared. We want them to have an experience that is valuable to them. We want them to look back on this and say, yes, that mattered. This was important to me. My needs were met. And so we will ask those questions of our graduates, and then we will modify our practice accordingly. It's incredibly important that everybody who walks out the door feels like they got what they should have got. And so the first step is to just flat out ask them. Okay, and we'll start doing that as soon as possible. D1, the district facilitates check-in sessions on the BC curriculum for parents and staff. And I can tell you from my own research that there is a lack of understanding out there, and I think it's important for parents to know more about the work that we do and why, and of course the district supports professional learning in places where educators express an interest or need. We need to support people with the challenges they have as they get this on the ground. Can't just make the assumption that we just point them and it's all going to work out. We have a role to play here to make sure our educators have what they need to be successful in supporting our students to be successful. Here we go. Goal number 2, to give students leading local and global change. Okay, and so that was the one that came out, as number 6 or number 7, and again, first principles of learning. It's holistic, it's reflective, it's reflexive, it's experiential, it's relational. It's focused on connectedness, reciprocal relationships, and a sense of place, and it requires the exploration of one's own identity. So we are part of an ecosystem. We need to know who we are, and we need to know how we fit, and we need to know what we can do to build that relationship over time. And so goal 2, it's a little briefer. Of course, the learn is the I was at core concept here. We don't need to have 5, 6, 7 outcomes for all of them. Essentially, here's two things we landed on: demonstrate personal confidence, pride, and empathy for others. Oh, incredibly important, for developing citizenship. Students engage in service and leadership activities in their class, school, and beyond. We want to see this. We want to support that. Meanwhile, educators will provide lessons that build community, emphasize social responsibility. Can't just hope that it happens. Got to design it. And educators co-develop class and school projects that emphasize service, leadership, and student voice. Okay, so having students do this work with intention, with design, taking projects and weaving in these elements of service, these elements of contribution is important for their ultimate success. And I can tell you from experience, as much as this is hard, it's hard to do that. It's a challenge. But when you are able to do it as a classroom educator, when you get your kids fired up about a purpose that's bigger than themselves, oh my goodness, they take off. And you get some pretty amazing learning, and you get some pretty amazing action. And that's what I would hope to see in all of our students. I want everybody to have this opportunity, and I think everybody on the committee and the Board of Education seem to agree. What are the tasks? Project presentations with elements of citizenship and leadership. Positive leadership is celebrated and recognized when it occurs. So mechanisms for those things for our students. And here we are. The district provides learning opportunities for authentic student action and shared learning experiences. This is such a good fit for us. I'm just, I know that we all get excited about students doing good work. And the district supports student leadership at all levels, including sponsoring district-wide events, providing a platform for student voice, and supporting Indigenous student leadership. Lots going on. Lots of room for growth here too. There's more we can do, and so we can keep going down this road and expand what's happening in our school district. Goal number 3: to belong. Supporting all learners in pursuit of equity of outcomes. From the First Peoples principles of learning. Learning involves the consequences of one's actions. Learning involves generational roles and responsibilities. And I'll tell you, when we were doing this, the original concept that was floated in conversation was to lift, and that got some legs. That carried on for a while, and then later on it was proposed that we shift it to belong, because that perhaps spoke more precisely to the intent, and I think there's certainly consensus around that being the better word, fit better with our frameworks, and it seemed to fit better with the data. Lift was good. Thought belong was just a little bit better. So here we are. Students recognize their own strengths and accomplishments, as well as the strengths and accomplishments of others. Students set goals, select and use learning strategies, advocate for supports, and use a variety of environments for learning. Educators use a strength-based approach for inclusion, instruction, and assessment. Educators support student goal setting, flexibility, and strategy use, student self-advocacy, flexible use of learning spaces. Classroom, and so on to tasks. Classroom and school reporting process include student goal setting and self-reporting. School environments are clean, safe, welcoming, and flexible. District achievement results show trend lines moving towards actual equity of outcome. That's always going to be the goal. I want to see all of our kids being successful, and whenever that happens, it's a joyous thing, but we want that trend line to show that we're getting somewhere. I'll go back to T2 for a moment, because this was a pretty profound conversation, and it manifested in a number of ways, but there was data to state that our schools weren't always as they should be, aren't always as they should be, and that this needed to be a priority for us to make sure that our bathrooms are in good shape, that there's comfortable places for students to sit and meet and be, and that our school culture was a positive thing. And prior to this being launched, I mean, there's been a number of pieces that have been activated, renovations that are going on, assessments that are going on to, the spaces that we have, and lots of work around vaping and having firmer response to that issue, in our schools, and also not just from a consequence perspective, but probably more importantly from a educational perspective, and just getting everybody involved in this across the school district, and that piece was really supported by our students. And when we had our student group in for that consult, there was a few moments there that were very real and very emotional, where it was that the issues that we're dealing with in our schools were obviously a bit raw, and it was, I think, very powerful for the entire group to hear that and to kind of process that, because that's the life that our kids are living in our buildings, and we want the best for them, and there's work that we can do to head down this path. So that's where that landed, right? That's all that stuff, that's where it landed. D1, clear direction on professional development for assessment and reporting, transparency in regard to structural supports for students with different needs. We do a lot of really good work in this district. We're very research-based. We're very, I think, up to date. But I think we're quiet about it. And I think there's an opportunity here for us to champion the philosophy that we're using, and also the impact of that and what you're seeing. And I mean, sometimes you get anecdotal information around that, and you're like, oh, this is not working, it's not working. But when you look at it through my lens, where I'm actually looking at student success data, no, it actually really is. We are making incredible gains in these categories of students that have struggled so much more in the past, and so we're getting there. We're doing the right things, and I think people need to know that. I think we need to do a better job sharing that. District prioritized maintaining school environments that are clean, safe, welcoming, and flexible. And I covered that in a moment ago. This needs to be a priority for us, and we need to take care of the kids that we have in the buildings that we're using for learning. And here we go, goal number 4, to grow, developing critical social skills and all the strategies necessary for a healthy self. This is, for lack of a better word, wellness. I was asked not to use the word wellness in the plan, so but this is kind of where we're going. As I mentioned early on, was a growing place for concern before COVID, and certainly during COVID, this concern accelerated and expanded. And so we want to make sure this is recognized in our school or our district strategic plan. So from the first People's Principles of Learning ultimately supports the well-being of the self, the family, the community, the land, the spirits, and the ancestors. And I think we'll probably have a conversation of the meaning of all that. And what I like about it when it's described to me is if you are religious, it could be that. If you are not, it doesn't matter. You can look at it in a completely different way, and say we just are all connected to each other, and whether you believe that or not, I think it's something for us to sort of pay attention to as an understanding. Learning involves recognize that some knowledge is sacred and only shared with permission or in certain situations, and that's a respect of not everything is up for sale. Not everything is, we can't grab everything and use it, and I like that. I think it's important for us to include that in the work that we do, and we got to be respectful, be careful around certain types of learning and information that's appropriate. Onto the goals, the outcomes. I mean, students have an awareness of self, express kind and respectful communication, solve conflict in peaceful ways, and take responsibility for their actions. Check, check. Students demonstrate healthy habits that lead to physical, mental, and emotional wellness. Students are connected to their school, culture, peers, and responsible adults in the system. Okay, I'm going to speak to that, but I'll wait till I get to the E3 here. So all that's wellness. It's all about relationships, all about taking care of yourself. It's all about us building a community where this is supported and that there's lots of opportunities for us to interact and support each other. E1, educators teach, model, and support awareness of self, express kind and respectful communication, solving conflict in peaceful ways, and taking responsibility of actions. A mirroring of the terminology. We want students to do this. We need to teach it. We need to model it as educators. Healthy habits that lead to physical, mental, and emotional wellness. Again, there's learning to do for everybody. And when our adults learn it and they're able to model it, when they're able to model it, they're able to influence as they should. They're also able to teach it. It's very important. I think explicit teaching there's a place for it here. Educators provide opportunities for positive social contact by supporting extracurricular events, clubs, and programs during lunch and after school. So that actually was a pretty big strand in the data, both the parent survey data, right? It was probably number one that came out of that. And it was a big strand of data that came from the kids. And of course, the surveys really early in the years, post-COVID, we just had a big break from all these things. We hardly had a chance to do it. And yeah, there's an appetite to be able to get at this kind of activity, to gather, to come together, to interact, through healthy competition, through cooperative activities, dances, and all that kind of stuff is just really important to the culture of our schools, but incredibly important to student well-being. The isolation was a massive problem, and anything we could do to break that down is critical. Now, I will say this: we talked about this a lot in the sessions. We recognize that a lot of this here is volunteer time. It's not curricular. It's not technically the work of our employees, of our teachers specifically. But anything that we can do as a school district to honor this, to support this, to encourage this, I think is really, appropriate. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how we can do more of this stuff and do this stuff better. There is an appetite to do it, though. We have a high number of engaged adults across the school district who value this type of activity as well and are willing to chip in and provide these opportunities for kids. And so we're going to keep doing that as best we can and expand as best we can. T1 tasks, and artifacts, student and survey and discipline data demonstrate positive trend lines in regard to wellness, connection, and behavior. So we're imagining that when we check in with kids formally and informally, when we create these types of metrics that measure this, when we have our external data points of a query survey, for example, that we're going to see some gains here, some improvements. But we also think that, the more our students connect to each other, to the community, the more that they feel a part of something bigger than themselves, that we're going to see a number of, we're going to see our behaviors improve overall. That there's a lot of research to back that up, and if we do a good job of building our community and supporting our students through that, it's going to lead to actual gains there. And of course, we want to see participation. We want to see them joining in extracurricular events, clubs, programs, lunch, and just recognizing that this is valuable to everybody. You can count, you can see it, right? And hopefully we will. The district supports learning opportunities for staff, students, and parents in support of wellness and connection. So, lots of learning to do there, as we can turn around and pass that learning on to the students. adults will benefit as well, no doubt. District sports extracurricular activities with a focus on inclusion and equity. Okay, so events for everybody. District sports parental engagement and involvement, and being, I think, more I would say specific or intentional about that. And we have a very active parent community here, and a number of people who would just love to, get in there and help with these types of activities. And so we're very lucky in that way here. Very strong DPAC, very strong school packs, but also parents all across this, the community that just, want to be involved and want to feel like they're a part of it too. And so we can harness that. Okay, all right. So that's the goals and the outcomes. And there's one last part of this conversation before we move over to questions, and that is that there seems to be a bit of a consensus around this being time for this conversation, time to perhaps move on to a new logo. There's our old slogan, and this is not the first version of this. This is maybe the slightly fancier version, but it is something that people have a hard time explaining. And when I came here, I can say I didn't get it, but I didn't want to speak too much about it because I don't know if people are attached to it or not. And I would say that generally it's not something that resonates with people. I think it's safe to say that. And so there is an appetite, to consider another option. And so we had some conversations around that, and then I had a bit of a side chat with with one of our staff members who is an artist, and I said, hey, we're thinking about going to looking at another option for a logo. How about you come up with something? And so he did, and it was really an interesting moment because, and I will say this, and this is me talking, very personal, is that I didn't really know what I wanted until I saw it, and when he showed it to me, I said yes, and then it's been modified a little bit since, and so I'm going to share that with you right now. And so there is a possible new logo for us, and I'll describe it to you. This is the work of Jesse Rakamas, from Qualicum First Nations, and of course here we have a scene, and you imagine yourself standing on the shores, along the ocean side, and perhaps at the Qualicum end, and you're looking to the east as the sun rises, and you can see that the ocean is there, and that's an important part of the place that we live. And you can see there's a landmass all over to the left, and it doesn't, whether it's Denman or the Skeety or the mainland, it's not, I think, important at this time. There is land across the water, and in the foreground we have Eagle Tree, and trees, of course, are symbolic of growth and wisdom and knowledge, I believe. And I will also say that Eagle Tree is multi-generation. It's survived. It has lived through the logging that the colonizer brought to the area, and so it's revered to a certain extent. And then we have the sun, and the sun, of course, rising. We can talk about that. All kinds of meaning there, but generally it's a source of nourishment. And so we have growth, we have wisdom, we have nourishment, and all of these things kind of play into this. Oops, go back a little bit, and what we have is something that's of this place that I think is meaningful, or could be meaningful. And so I'm just floating this as an idea that we could use as our new logo going forward. Jesse and I are, of course, in a little bit of a negotiation around usage, and so we got to work our way through that. But I did think that this was a time to show it to you officially in this current form, and share it with a chance for community to give us feedback if you choose to do so. So there you go. Tell you you put it in a background, with the different kinds of colors. It just jumps off the page. I really am pleased with it. Don't want to get emotional about it or labor the point, but I quite happy about it, and I hope you agree that that could work for us. So I'm going to turn the conversation over to our chair, Eve Flynn. It's time for some questions if you have some. And so I'm going to just mute myself for a moment. And what I will do is I'll also stop sharing. There you go. And see if there's a conversation to be had about the content that we've had.
Well, just thanks very much, Peter. That's a tremendous amount of information. It's been at least a year's worth of work on the part of many people, and a great number of people that are here on the screen this evening. I find it very exciting. I can't wait to see how it rolls out as we get past the June meeting and into next fall. Had time for conversation? Yes. Time for questions. So Trustee Kurland, you've got your hand up.
Thanks. So thanks, Peter, and to everybody who took part in this. I really appreciated your stewardship through this. It's been quite a journey, and I think a lot of good stuff is coming out of it. And as far as the logo goes, I love it. It puts me on the beach, and I'm looking to the east, and the sun is coming up, towards, it looks like Cape Roger Curtis, with artistic imagination, but it does look like Cape Roger Curtis, which is down off Bowen, and I've seen that many times. So I really appreciate the colors and the way that it's laid out. So hats off to Jesse. Thank you.
Any other comments, folks? I know we have lots of dedicated senior team members who joined us this evening. Please jump in if you have comments. And Barry again, or are you still your hand? Okay.
No, it's me again. I keep going back to the same thing, which is how do we, as our strategic plan progresses, that we have feedback and results that we say are fulfilling the strategic plan. And I keep thinking about, being a very young teacher coming out of university and not really having a grasp on the power that this teacher has, or a very soon to retire teacher that, has maybe not, is getting tired or whatever, but, to have this strategic plan as part of their learning environment is so critical. And then I go to the students, which, students are like, fish never discovered water. They're swimming in it. And students, I'm 16 years old or 17 years old, and I'm not thinking about the future. I'm thinking about right now. I'm thinking about the dance. I'm thinking about my girlfriend, thinking about, the car that I want or whatever. And so we're having to guide these people into being productive citizens. And it's very, very difficult because, not all of these students have been at the place where they accept social responsibility. It's a place where, we're trying to ease them into it. That, say, for instance, Jared Abel's trip to Europe. These kids went to Europe because they're curious and they wanted to be with their friends. And we impart higher order thinking, to these trips because of that. And so that's where, the joys of teaching and learning come together in our schools, is is to have the meeting of these minds, which is, makes it very difficult because, we're sitting here doing these things in 1994, we never thought of the impact of social media, Facebook, things like that. And the students were getting into that. And now we're dealing with AI and the students are dealing with that. And, we're not even, maybe a lot of us aren't even aware of that thing. And so this is the challenge that we face. So hats off to all of us.
Yes, and I think this gives us some strategies to enhance it and live with it and know how to work with it, which is a difficult process altogether.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Carrie.
Hi. Can you just touch on the topic and the challenges that the district faces as having a strategic plan, but then also having a budget, and how those two things work together? And even some things like, you can say like, yeah, we would love bathrooms and stuff, but we know that we're not going to get $2 million to go make fancy bathrooms and things like this. Or saying, we want lots of coaches and refs like this, but there's not enough staff to do that. So just kind of your challenges on your side, and then what you face and what us on the parent and guardian side can do to support your challenges as well.
Bake sales, Gary.
I appreciate the question and the commentary. And I think it's great when you get a new plan and you see this content there. There's a sense of this rush of enthusiasm, like we got to get at this, we got to do this right now. And it's in the enthusiasm that carries us through the process and makes change happen. But we also need to be patient. We should recognize that there's only so much we can do at any given moment in time, and that we do have constraints in our environment, so many constraints in our environment. We got to pick away at it. But it is a 5-year plan, and we've already started talking about bathroom renovations, and they're getting prioritized. We've already started working on building a response to vaping and getting safe spaces for our students in our hallways and so on, and taking an all hands on deck approach to that. And the rest of this, I mean, there's elements that we're already kind of doing, and there's elements that we can sort of continue to do a little bit better, and other things to pick up. But it is a 5-year process, and we've got to just make sure that we're making progress all the time, picking away all the time, and then what we'll find is a year or two, we'll look back and say, hey, we did some things. We're actually farther ahead in some areas, and we can measure that. We can see it, but we have data to support it, and then to keep going. And then at the end of that 5-year stretch, look back and say, you know what? The bulk of this has been, addressed to some extent. That's what my hope for this is. And I think that's that element of reasonableness and just measured confidence that you can work your way through it is very important.
Yeah, great question, Carrie. And it is part of the responsibility of the work of the strategic plan is to figure out the budget and the budget priorities that answer to that plan.
Right. And then just kind of like we had said in the meetings too, like, we've got your guys' responsibility, we've had staff responsibilities. So maybe just, one more comment on, you presented this, any other parents and guardians watching this, what do you want to say to them? Like, what can we do as parents and guardians?
Well, I appreciate the comment about the budget, and the strategic plan should guide all of our conversations, the generation of our operational plans, the decisions we make around our spending, and I mean, to some degree, our staffing and other things. But also, what kinds of conversations we engage in, what kinds of things, we want to spend our thought and our time and our energy on. And what I would say to parents is to, immerse themselves in the plan, to try to understand what's important, engage, with their students, engage with their students' teachers, and that school community, and see where they fit in, see what they have an appetite to support, and of course I spoke to this at some point in there, and really I would say, the instructional piece is wrapped up in the role of the teacher, but there's all these places where parents can support that process from their own homes, and there's a whole raft of things that parents can do on an extracurricular front to help build culture in the school in just so many ways. And that is work that is already going on. And I would, mention you and your colleagues around your steady presence in the school, your enthusiasm in the school, and how infectious that is, and how much of an impact that has. So.
Yeah, school community is integrally, I think, an place to involve parents is the overall community piece. Braden, you have your hand up. Mr. Gordon.
Thanks, Trustee Flynn. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm on my cell phone here. I just want to pipe in as one of the PVP and just how much I personally appreciated spending all those sessions together with the QP members, the MADA members, the parents, and especially the students, and really appreciating how much of everyone's voice was taken into consideration during these sessions. We really had a lot of input, and a team really took our input, valued it, and I see the evidence in the plan that has been outlined for tonight. So I just want to thank everyone for that, because it was a very purposeful and meaningful a working group, and I really again appreciate that the students' inputs was widely considered in this plan, because they're the ones that we're working with. They're the ones at the focus here, and I appreciate that. And I agree with Barry that a logo is on point. Thank you.
Thanks, Braden.
Yeah.
I guess, were you
And
at table number 5? Were you?
An ongoing joke,
No.
folks, about table number 5
Table number
being
5.
being the difficult table, and the the table that raised the counterpoints and pushed back against the status quo, and we had a lot of fun with that. But I thank you, Braden, and I do want to emphasize that the core data came from students. I mean, we very much looked at the parents' feedback, and we certainly listened to all of the stakeholders, the participants, the representatives in the room. But the bulk of this, came from students out of those focus groups, and then went back to our students, to kind of test drive it and see what it is. There's one thing though, I got to say, it was not adequately represented. We honestly tried. You can't get it all in. You can't fix everything, but there's one gap here that I have to cop to. And I've heard it many times from students when working with them on planning, and that is the jargon. We have a lot of educational jargon in this document. The language is the language of educators for the most part. It's very hard to strip that out of a strategic plan document, and they identified that as a problem, and they're absolutely right. And I do feel like I've let them down a little bit, that I was able to thin that out a little bit. But I'll also say this, as much as it's critical, to have buy-in and belonging and understanding and connection to it, ultimately it is the work of the educators that's going to drive this. And so it is a document that's primarily designed for educators, the people who are in the system, pushing this learning forward. And so ultimately it has to be the language of educators, and as much as it'd be nice if it was for everybody in that way.
Carol, then Norberta. Carol. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Of course I am. I just wanted, I personally really enjoyed the process. I feel this is a directive for the district to make it all become a reality. The process was wonderful, and working with all the different groups was really eye-opening for me. And I just wanted to comment on the logo. We've seen a black and white copy of it, and I love the story that goes along with each area of it, but the colors really brought it home to me. I really love the new logo, so I'm hoping others really like it as well.
Thanks, Carol. Norberta.
Good evening. My question is about goal number 4, and about the developing critical social skills and all the strategies necessary for a healthy self. What I'm curious about is that the focus for educators is to create those opportunities for that. I'm wondering if there was a discussion of being more intentional with the teaching, like, for example, using the collaborative of academic, social, and emotional learning, the CASEL, and some of those areas so that the learning is more intentional. I do have some concerns that, providing the opportunities in and outside the classroom. And I do have a direct concern about promoting extracurricular in that format. And, I'm sure there'll be further feedback on that. But there seems to be a missing component of intentional teaching about social emotional learning when there is so much research and focus on that. In fact, when I was at the mental health in schools, they actually were talking a lot about CASEL and that intentional learning component. So if that is a goal, there, I believe there's an opportunity to tap into that. Thank you.
So now I'm sorry, I'm not entirely familiar with CASEL, but in various places that I have worked, there's been different, and I'm not a package person or a program person necessarily, but when you don't have pervasive knowledge in a system, it's you don't have a depth of training to rely on. There's a place for that often, to bring in learning that's been prepared and that for to serve a specific purpose, and I've certainly seen that have positive impact. But to answer your question, yeah, I think there was a conversation about specific teaching, and I think I was touching on it here and there as we went through. Is we want our adults to be able to do this work, to have these skills, to have this knowledge, to be able to specifically teach these strategies, provide these tools to students, and that's going to require us to bring that learning into our school district in order to ensure that we have the capability of doing that. As far as the extracurricular stuff goes, yeah, absolutely, we're having that conversation in depth. And I saw Matt on the call a little bit. I mean, he can speak for himself if he wants to pipe in, but there's the recognition from the teachers that, oh man, this stuff was so important. It was so important to me as a student. It was so important for me to be a part of it, building culture as a young teacher, and I really value this. But also, you can't make anybody do that. And I'm like, I know, I'm one of these people. I recognize that, we're paying our employees to do the work inside the school day and to prepare to do that work inside the school day. This is an addition to it, and it's a challenge for us. But I'll tell you, it could not be ignored. The data was very clear that this is what our community wants. This is what our kids want, and so by hook or by crook, we've got to somehow support it, even if we know we're relying on volunteers to do it, or volunteer time to do it. Yeah, that was certainly a rich conversation.
Any other questions or queries or thoughts to land on the table? This is, I think, as Peter outlined in the beginning of the beginning, and how we roll it out is a 5-year process. Trustee Awesome and Trustee Kurland.
Okay, first, thanks to everybody that participated in this process up to now. I think it was a really good process. I certainly enjoyed it. Just, I guess my 2 cents is, I always think of a strategic plan. It is a living document. It's an organic document. It's not set in stone for the next 5 years. Things can shift and move and adapt where necessary. So I think that's really important. But my other question was, I'm sorry, Peter, you may have mentioned it right off the top, but this is open for the next 2 weeks for comment. I'm just wondering, how do you wish to receive that feedback? Want people to email you, or is there a form? How's the best way for
Um,
people to get a hold of you?
the
for
best
that
way, I
feedback.
think what we'll do is we'll, when it gets posted, we'll, I think, email out the posted, the recording with the link, but the link will be available on our website if it's not already up. I made a survey and shared it with my staff today to post. So it should be available and it should open up
At 7:30.
at 7:30 tonight. So if you go to the website, you should see that link there underneath the link to the presentation, and it should be live within moments here. And so I'll just share it with you. Where is it here? Looks a little like this. And so there's our, proposed logo. And it's just really simple. Look at it pop off that page. It's really nice. And so, please put your name in there, tell us the category respondent, and then really open-end it so that people can just say what they want to say about what they want to say, not limit it. And then what I'll do is that's going to be an extraction that comes out in an Excel document. I'll just turn that over to the board so they can read your comments.
Trustee Kurland.
Yeah, just looking at that, makes me want to take part in that information survey, seeing the logo. That's what it does, it draws you in and makes you want to take part in it. But I just wanted to say that, regarding our previous, what we were talking about with extracurricular things. I remember my swim coach a lot more than my math teachers. And so that's why it's so critical for these students to engage like that.
Thanks, Barry. We all don't have swimming pools at every high school. I happen to go to a high school with a swimming pool, so I did have that as an extracurricular, but that we don't have many left in the province, I don't think, for swimming. Any other comments, folks? It's been a long day for some. Senior staff have been at some other meetings.
I just noticed, I was in the comments, and Francois doesn't like my grammar. And so he's going to send me, Francois, I'll ask you to just send me what you think it should say, and I'll have a bit of a conversation with my my French consultant, and maybe we'll get back to you on that. But I want it to be, I'm not the person to ask, but tell me what you think it should say if it's not sitting right with you, and then we'll take it from there and modify it if need be.
No, absolutely. This is the time to get it down properly. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. And as Peter indicated, the survey piece will be live. The whole presentation will be on the web, and it's been recorded, and people at their leisure can look at it again. And everyone have a lovely evening and enjoy the sun before the sun goes down and we get to the summer solstice. Thanks, everyone.
It's Sepco, everyone, and as the saying goes, nothing left to do but the work.
That's the key.
Thanks, everybody.